Do you know how many businesses are going to be impacted by that? Is it going to be all in one shot, or are they going to do like this part first and then reopen, and then this part and then reopen, or?
That is a good question. I don't know.
That hasn't been established yet, so we'll know more this fall, probably November, December, when they start getting the actual
Drawings?
plans by the state, and then the state says, this is how you're gonna do it, and then we'll be able, before we put it out to bid, then we'll have an idea what we would like to see, but then when it's bid, we'll know exactly what the phases will be and where. But our guess is they're gonna phase it out into 3 or 4 different phases. But because it's a state project, we don't really have a lot of say in it. So we'll know more probably the November through January, because we'll have to get it out to bid in January.
So that may impact the budget even into the following year, potentially, yeah.
Yeah, so we're asking for information by the end of the year, but again, the state can do it whenever they want to do it.
So they've given you no timeline as to
Construction season
finishing?
2022.
Okay.
And
You know what we know now. So.
All right.
and the school is just trying to have it pushed to be done, obviously, before school starts. But
Wouldn't, yeah.
Yeah, and the fair would like to have it done before fair,
But-
and it's just not, it's
gonna be what it is.
Whatever the state does on their timeline, so.
Yeah. It's gonna be,
yeah,
Frustrating for everybody involved trying to plan.
yeah.
but we learned to deal.
Okay, so with that, then we can take that back, Dan, with that
Yep.
proposed, and we can see when we're crunching our numbers and where things are at, we can see what we can do.
Because I was just looking, on our programs, what did we spend? About 8,000, it said, in 2020?
Yeah, about 8,000, but you had budgeted for 20,000. So that's why in 2021 it was dropped down to 10.
To 10, when we haven't had much this year out yet. Just,
That's a solid program.
And
yep,
there will be a balance left over in your fund of at least 20,000 or so that'll roll over on top of what you're asking for here.
it's good to know. All right,
We can take that back to the budget meetings.
yeah. All right, thank you.
Anybody else got anything on budget? Nothing else.
So the engineering fees that we're not gonna spend this year on the water will be over to next year.
They will be rolled over, yes.
Find those. All right, excuse me. Looks next is our conflict of interest policy.
So this was part of your last meeting discussion, and Matt sent out a draft version of a conflict of interest policy. Happy to spend some time reading through it, wordsmithing, anything you all want to change, or if you want to adopt as is, I'll let you lead that.
So, everybody get a chance to look at it?
Mm-hmm.
A little bit.
Do we have any questions or suggestions?
Well, I think anybody that volunteers their time for a program like this should be able to still continue to do business as usual. And in looking at this, like for somebody like myself that's in the real estate, that wouldn't happen, which it hasn't happened. So under number 3, item B, purchase order, informal bid. So as I said in my email, an example was the sand company, for instance. So the sand company had contacted me originally to look at the school to start with. And then when the numbers came down to nuts and bolts, it wasn't going to work. And I convinced them that they needed to come to our community anyway, because we needed affordable housing as well. And so I sent them all the information, did a lot of detailed work, emails back and forth, met with them in my office, did follow-up information for them, did assessments for them, and so the last one I did was the day before the submittal for the grants, and it was to do market analysis for the property that they're going to be using, because they had to have that for submittal, and they were offering to pay for that, and I had to decline that. Because it's part of the process that the city then stepped in and went and talked to them on their own and said, hey, let's purchase this property out here, and that was the property that I had been working with them on. And so the city went to the listing agent and bought it through a listing agent to give back to them. So then, that's how I lost my commission on that. But, so in reading this, anything that I would do to help a commercial property that may ultimately go through the EDA to purchase, or to get help, like with TIF, or, you know, if the city was giving them back a property to use, or anything of that nature, I feel would violate this conflict of interest policy. Because I still have ongoing with the school, and of course I had that listed and sold that, and they will be coming to the city for help, I'm sure, and working with the city on that. And I'm going to have to continue to do the process with them.
So, on that one, I mean, the partnership sold the school to this new group, and that's a sale, and you were the listing agent, or so that's done.
No, it's not done yet, but,
When it's done, once that's closed, they have the building in their name, and that's done.
yeah.
You could still work in the capacity of the EDA with wherever they would come ask for, because that would be a finished transaction.
Well, it depends on if they need to have, you know, TIF money to continue forward, or if they need to have some grant money or
They're not
help.
just gonna buy it and come to see it, they're gonna do it contingent.
They'll still have to have help in order to finish the project, yeah. So that's why in reading this, that's why my email was, you know, anybody that volunteers their time should still be able to do business as usual. It shouldn't interfere with them making their livelihood, I guess, for lack of better verbiage.
Yeah. I was wondering, if do we have a previous policy?
No.
Oh, so this is new?
Yep.
Okay, so we've never had a...
We're trying to address,
A realtor on the board before?
Well,
We've had bankers on the board.
we're just trying to make sure that
All kinds of
for
people
everybody.
that have made money off of...
Yeah, and actually it was brought up by the sand company.
yeah, I saw the email from Sands, he was on
Yeah.
the board of that. And I totally get it, I just don't, I think you can do your job and still be on the EDA to generally attract business to town.
Yeah.
I think the way the sand thing went down, that was a little odd.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever, yeah, we'll just leave it, it was odd, I don't think that was the normal thing. I'm just trying to think of the school project.
Well, as I read in it myself, I mean, sorry to cut you off, it says that your extent to the involvement is in the business. It doesn't say, you know, you can still, you're not doing it to gain personally. I mean, you're not going out of your way and misleading them and trying to bring them one way. You're showing them everything, so you're not necessarily gaining, you're not improperly using your office. You're still doing what you do as a realtor and EDA. You're not...
And I think the difference is, if you were on the city council, it might be different, because ultimately, the EDA makes no binding decision.
Right.
EDA is a recommending board to the council, and the council would approve or disapprove of any subsidies or whatever it is they'd be asking for assistance, where you could vote yes or no here or abstain here if you were involved personally, and we could recommend to the council to do X, Y, Z. It's up to the council to say yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
You ultimately, at the EDA, none of us as an EDA member have
the authority to
We have the authority as a group to,
recommend.
majority to recommend to the council an action. But just since I've been mayor, we've had planning and zoning and EDA recommendations come to council, and some get approved and some don't. So, that's, I think, kind of gives you a little bit of a layer of separation as far as the conflict, and then if it was, so say the school thing's going through and they say, hey, EDA, we want to ask for this, that's when you would abstain. Just say, I'm just going to leave the room, I don't need to be here for that, and just kind of remove yourself from that
So,
conversation.
as partner owners of the school, we would abstain from any vote.
From any
Yeah, I mean, so anybody that
discussion,
would have
vote,
anything
anything.
on, yeah, I mean, that would
Yeah,
just,
because
you
we
go
are
for it.
partners.
Yeah.
right, it'd be good for them to just abstain on anything that goes in. But ultimately, the EDA doesn't make that decision on any final binding thing that the city's gonna do. So, I think that gives you the whole thing a little bit of a layer of separation. That's probably why we didn't have an official conflict of interest policy for the EDA, because ultimately, we don't make the decision here, it's made at the council. So it gives you a little bit of separation.
And kind of how I read it too, I mean, you're not like the owner of something, like, you were just a realtor in the involvement.
But I do earn a commission.
You
off
earn a
of the
commission,
sale.
but you weren't going into it, you weren't selling it to us because that was the only way we go.
No, that.
All the information was laid out, so, I mean, you were up front with all the information, is the way I would look at it. So you weren't going out of it to gain personally,
No.
but, you were...
The other thing that kind of concerns me too is not openly advocating for all the great programs that are available to the community as a whole. I think it needs to be done a lot more. I really do.
As far as,
Well, any of the programs that are available for people, for businesses to come in and use. So, for instance, like with this sand company, I had said, I am on the EDA board, and we do have other lots that may work for you in our community that aren't listed. They're owned by the city of Casson. That may be an option for you, So I was saying I'm on the EDA, but, lots that the city owns, of course, are not listed and wouldn't involve a commission per se or whatever. But yet I was still advocating, for that even though I was working with that client. There's so many programs that, being a business owner, I never even knew existed.
The EDA is very under wraps. I would honestly say 70% of the population of Casson, if you say, I'm on the EDA board, they'll think you're with some education thing out the high school.
right, so you take the business community, not the whole population, because it doesn't apply to 90% of the population.
I just think we need to do a much
Chamber
better
meetings,
job
the
of that.
last 15 years, we've had EDA talks there about all the different programs that we have. So anybody who's a chamber member, 60, 70, 80 people, 20, 30, 40 go to meetings, they've heard about it.
Not everybody's on the
disagree with
chamber, I
that.
agree.
No,
So
not
you've been
everybody's
to
on the
a chamber
chamber.
meeting where the EDA's been there to say something
No.
about the facade program, the revolving loan program, nothing?
I haven't.
I have, many times. I've talked about them during my mayor's update. So I agree with you that we're working on getting the
Do you think the majority of the chamber members show up at the meetings?
well, that's why I said 20 to 30.
Yeah.
Right.
So, you're
Those 20 to
talking
30 know about it.
one-third of your
Does
membership.
the chamber do a newsletter? If they're meetings, they have minutes and they're published in the newsletters,
No,
okay?
not that I know of.
No.
Because, I don't know, I mean, I guess if I was a chamber member, I'd be asking more questions.
Come join us.
I don't have a business.
So was this original statement that promoting the programs as EDA members, you think this conflicts with this conflict of interest policy? Is that what you're saying?
There was something about
That's a separate conversation.
not using this as to gain personal interest or whatever. But the
Yeah.
more you talk about the programs, the more you're generating buzz and interest, And I just really think, I think we need to do a better job of that.
Well, absolutely, but I don't think that's a conflict.
No.
No,
You being
no,
on
it
the EDA
shouldn't,
board-
it shouldn't be a conflict.
Yeah, it's not a conflict.
No, it should not be a
Talking about the
conflict.
programs.
And that's kind of the way I took it, as if you're promoting, you know, like I said, with the sand company, I said, well, I'm on the EDA board, and I do know that there are several other lots that may be usable for you. And was that taken as trying to promote myself for them? I don't know. That's in the eyes of the beholder, I guess. But that's why I said, I think, everybody should be talking about our programs, you know, we should, you know, have flyers out there to, you know, any and all the businesses, because not everybody is on the chamber.
Right, that's a
But-
whole separate conversation.
Yeah,
As far
yeah.
as the conflict of interest policy, anyone saying, hey, we have a facade improvement program, if you were to buy that building downtown, that's not a conflict of interest. That's
Yeah.
just sharing good information with somebody who's looking to come to town. I don't see how that's a conflict of interest at all.
I think as long as we abstain from voting on something that we have
If you're
a
involved in the
financial
process.
gain in,
Right.
we should have no problems.
I think the two important pieces are the upfront disclosure, and I've seen it done a couple of ways. I've seen other boards say you should abstain from conversation on topics as well, so that you're not swaying a vote. But I've also seen it where they've participated in conversation and then just abstained from the vote. So I think it's really up to the body on what you see as appropriate. But this language here, I think there's qualifying words like improperly, that as long as you disclose things or you're operating as business as usual, that it doesn't conflict with this policy. Right? It's if you were doing an undercover deal and wanted to show up, right, then that would be an improper use of personal gain.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that you can do your job, and again, take the whole Vail property thing as the outlier. That's the first time I've seen that happen in my year, at least my years involved here anyway. I'm not saying it hasn't happened before. But as far as everything else, as long as you disclose up front that, hey, I am on the EDA, and we'll be discussing this down there, and as long as you tell the EDA, hey, I'm involved in this transaction in some capacity, you don't have to say what it is, but I feel that I should not vote on it, I should abstain from the vote. I don't know if we want to limit the discussion, because sometimes you can learn some things
Yes,
about the
I
project.
agree.
And we can make up our own minds there. But I think, because I do think everybody we have on the EDA, you know how you feel, right? It feels like, oh, I'm involved in this, you can tell us that ahead of time, I'm involved in the project, here's my opinion on it. That can help us make a decision also, without being, so I don't think we want to limit the discussion.
Right.
Or just,
No.
if you're involved in transactions, and if you have questions about it, just ask. Just give me a shout, and I can even run it by the city attorney. I've had to do that myself with some decisions on council where I've just called the attorney and said, hey, we're discussing this tonight, here's my personal involvement. What do you think? I mean, I just don't want it to come back to the city to...
Yeah, I don't either.
I think as long as
Robert,
you're
does
upfront,
CEDA have a conflict of interest policy, or your other EDAs?
Yeah, most EDAs have a conflict of interest policy. This was taken, I think, from our Lake City policy. So this is, a pretty standard conflict of interest policy that's across EDAs.
And I agree too with Chris, that again, we're just a recommending board to the council, and as long as we're up front and with our decisions, what we're doing, we should be fine, but I agree that we do need a conflict of interest policy for the city.
But we do have money that we have the availability of spreading around, loaning out, spending.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're only recommending to the council. We do have, when you have money, you have some power. Simple as that.
Yeah,
The council still has to approve.
Still goes to council after.
We just recommend to the council that we want to spend the money. The council still has to approve it.
We could recommend and say, hey, we approve that facade program. And
Yes.
the council said, no, we don't think it fits, sorry.
Right. But we still have some leeway with the facade program after the council approves it. I mean,
Well, no,
Yeah.
if a business comes and wants to do it, we look at it and approve it, the council's still gonna look at it and make sure it fits into the program. They make the ultimate decision on it.
so if we decide, if somebody comes and gives us we've done this to the building and we spent $4,000 and we'd like to be reimbursed for $2,000, that gets voted on at the council?
Part of the,
Yeah, it's part of the-
payables. All the payables
I
are
need to
voted
go to more
on.
council meetings.
And it has to be approved before they do work.
Yeah, has to be approved here before it can go there,
Here, yeah.
Have a two-step process.
Ah, okay.
just to make sure that,
Now, 99.9% of the time, if it goes to the EDA and staff and it's been approved to that point to where staff recommends it, if you and Tim get together, see the application, bring it to, we know it's gonna fit, it's
Right.
rubber stamp, but there are times we've had,
just still look
not
at
like that particular program, but especially out of planning and zoning, we've had some things that we didn't approve.
Oh, okay.
it. So it's still, yeah.
Well, and the revolving loan fund has a loan committee too, so I mean, there's,
Yep.
from a general body to a, another committee too, as far as that goes.
Right.
But as far as conflict of interest, I mean, I hope that addressed some of your concerns. I think as long as we're upfront, communicate upfront, I think you should be fine. Again, it's your personal decision. That's why I asked you to come back one more
Yeah.
time before you ran out the door, but, it's your decision ultimately, but we just want to have something in writing, but I think it's more of the intent and then the improperly, I think adds a lot to it.
Yeah, and I would never
If
do
we communicate
that.
up front, and then we can kind of, we'll work hard out to avoid situations like the one that we ran into, which I hope is an outlier and probably will never happen again, so.
Well, I think it's a full disclosure thing, I
Yeah.
mean, if there's full disclosure, then, everybody knows what's going on,
Yep,
and
exactly.
vote on it appropriately.
And it's common that communities will run into some type of conflict. You have a board of business owners, right, voting on things related to the community where they're also community members. so.
It's unavoidable. I mean, we have a small community with, just like every organization, you have the same group of people, small group of people that volunteer for a lot of different things. You're gonna be involved, that's why you're here.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
value you being here.
Do you want us, if we're done with discussion, sorry, Chris.
Yeah.
I apologize. Do we want to make a motion and second on this?
Yeah, if you want to adopt this as
I mean,
is.
so, I would take a motion to adopt this as written unless...
I'll make that motion.
we have a
I'll
mo-
second.
We have a motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next is the other business for the ARPA.
Sure. So there is a federal EDA program called the Economic Adjustment Assistance Program, and it's a program that they have every year, but there's additional dollars because of ARPA, and it's probably their most flexible program in terms of it can pay for construction projects, non-construction projects, it can do strategy and planning, and so I would just want to have a conversation if that is something that, this body's interested in going for those dollars. Federal EDA applications are fairly intense, and there's a deadline coming up in March, but I was specifically thinking about the original site that Sand Companies was looking at. Running the infrastructure there was too expensive, so there'd be the opportunity for some federal EDA grant dollars to look at that, or some other projects in town. Would just love to have some discussion on.
Is there a fee for applying for this?
Well, it depends. So if you wanted to use your contract time, right, recognize that some other things will be put off as part of the CEDA contract. But if you wanted our grants department to write it, then there would be a fee to have our grants department, prepare this application. And I don't know those rates
Okay.
off the top of my head.
So is this federal program, the stuff we have with the state of Minnesota through deed and things, we had to have like an anchor tenant already on the line basically to get some infrastructure help. I cannot remember the program that was, started with an M.
I don't remember either, but I know what you're talking about, where you had to have...
Like MIF, Minnesota Investment Fund?
No.
It was something, anyway, it was it was where we could borrow some money and also get some grants for infrastructure, but we had to have one or two.
Keep tenants.
The business park, grant, the industrial park grant through deed.
Whatever that's
Yep.
about,
Yep.
So, we had to have tenants lined up. So for the federal grant, is that also the same criteria?
That is not a requirement for the federal
Okay.
EDA. So if you wanted to just run infrastructure to that area that Sand Companies was originally looking at and, you know, prep it to be shovel-ready, that'd be an option for this program.
Okay. And what's the deadline for the grant proposal?
Early March.
Okay, so we have time to...
And what kind of time do you think it takes to do one of these grants?
I've written a few of them. It's 40 to 50 hours of time to prep them, right, make sure that you have all the right drawings that needs to go to the EDA. It has to be approved out of the Chicago office before you're even able to apply. So it's a fairly intense process. And they're going to be very competitive dollars to get as well, so.
Could you check to see what your grant writing department charges? I mean, just so we have
Yeah,
kind
we
of an
can-
idea of
Put
price-wise?
together an estimate.
For
on
that way versus if we went through using you too, I was just kind of curious.
And a comparison cost, yeah.
Yeah, make sure we know what we're getting into before we say we want to do it.
Yes,
Well, if
yeah.
it's not due till March, then we...
Got some
have to
time.
go through budgeting and then...
Yes.
Transfers, we know
Yes.
if it's something that we want to do.
It is something that you want to start several months.
In advance, yes.
So,
Mhm.
We agree.
Yeah, kind of November, October, November.
Okay.
Now, your allocated time, though, is only 2 days a week, correct?
Correct. So, 16 hours a week, whatever that is, multiplied out.
Right, that'd take you 4 weeks, 3
The
weeks.
benefit is I'm actually only part-time with CEDA, and I'm only working with this community. So, you get a little extra work out of me just because you don't have competing communities.
And we should take advantage of it, yes.
But don't scare them away.
Should have said that.
We like the honesty up front.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
No, this is good.
Yes.
I would say that we can look into it, we should probably look at it at the council level too, as far as what's the long-range plan.
Mhm.
Not this plan, after we decide not to go there, now over there, we go back there and what that might look like, so. we'll know.
Sure. My thoughts were if you could phase in that initial piece of infrastructure, right, then you could start to look at state programs for the industrial area of it.
Mhm.
Because that was also part of that wetland delineation study, was if we could get that eastern side where Carter owns that.
Like, more
where we had
accessible,
somebody who could access it from the east rather than have to bring it all the way around from the west.
it'd be
It
cheaper.
would be a lot more
Right.
More
affordable
economical,
than
yeah.
ask for as much either, so. Maybe they can get that study done this fall, or we can. Okay.
Right. But then you'd be looking, you know, another year out to apply for,
Sure, but at
which
least,
the EDA has it, it's just gonna be a little less competitive with, you know, the additional dollars available.
Okay.
thank you.
We have some groups, and since you're new, I'd like to, get some sort of list, if they're still alive and well, or who's on them. I'm pretty sure I'm on a hockey thing, which we've never had a meeting. I think you're on it too.
I believe I am too.
Yeah, and I'm kinda thinking,
Or subcommittees.
I've been appointed to a couple of subcommittees, never had a meeting. I know one time there was like, something happened, oh yeah, we forgot you were on the, okay, so,
We'll go back to that, because I think the
Yeah.
hockey was created, but the hockey never came back.
Right, so that one's
No.
done.
Nothing to do.
But then there's the loan committee.
there's the
You get
downtown
lots, which-
lots, there's,
Yep.
yeah,
So we might have to
So-
go back to some of the minutes, unless they had it written down, but.
Yeah, I don't think I never recorded it, so.
no. Well, that's what I'm saying, it would be good for,
A refresher
good
for all
me
of us.
and good for him to know
Yes.
Sure.
who,
Sure.
you know, he might be contacting for,
No, lots was you and Tom, right?
Yeah, and then there's the
The
loan
Nicholas, right?
Yeah, there's,
committee, which is you and I.
yeah, you and I, which have never had a meeting either, I don't think.
'Cause we need it, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
So that's something we
So
can look
we're
at.
a little ragged with knowing what we're doing here.
Okay. Items for September, and one would be the grant price, hourly rate.
Yeah.
I think I would have a pretty good idea of what a grant like